You know something's off when a man who's seen his wife come home with blood under her nails and a 1,000-yard stare from the door still gets rattled by a bouquet of flowers. But there it was, a box of fresh white lilies with a note in calligraphy, like something out of a Victorian novel, delivered on a random Tuesday afternoon. Not her birthday. Not an anniversary. Just a day that had no business being memorable. And that's exactly why it was. Jesse's boss had sent them. Again. But this time the gesture was too polished, too deliberate. I might not be a paranoid man by nature, but I'm not stupid either. You don't send hand-delivered flowers to a married woman unless you've either lost your mind, or you've misplaced your boundaries. And Dr. Anton, her revered, smug, annoyingly photogenic gynecologist boss, didn't strike me as the forgetful type. I'd ignored it for years. The compliments he'd showered her with. The thank you dinners after successful surgeries. The time he toasted to the best hands in the clinic, while everyone else toasted to the new year. I brushed it off. Because Jessie was a professional. Respected. Composed. She earned good money. Great money, actually. After every patient signed the discharge form, there was always some mysterious envelope with gratitude from the families. Sometimes cash. Sometimes luxury chocolates. Once, a set of opera tickets she never even opened. I didn't complain. That kind of bonus income kept the mortgage paid and the wine rack full. But flowers? No one tips in petals. No one says thank you with lilies unless there's something blooming beneath the soil. At first, I laughed. A little dry chuckle when the delivery guy handed it over. Said it was from Anton, no last name needed, and winked. I should have slugged him just for the smirk, but I kept my cool. Set the box on the kitchen island and waited for Jessie to get home. She breezed in around 6, hair tied back, coat slung over one arm, and didn't even blink at the flowers. Just a quick glance, a neutral expression, and then she started sorting mail like nothing was out of place. That's when I knew something was definitely out of place. See, Jessie always made a comment. Always. Oh, those are lovely, or, who are those for? That kind of thing. This time. Radio silence. Like the flowers were a coffee mug or a kitchen towel, something she expected to see. She even skipped her usual decompression routine. Normally she'd pour a glass of wine, kick off her shoes, and vent about the arrogant residents or the smell of antiseptic that never leaves the skin. Instead, she said she had a headache and went straight to the bedroom. Left her phone in her purse. That was new too. Jessie never parts with that thing. It's like an extra limb. But that night, it just lay there on the counter like a snake in a basket, too still to be safe. Now, I'm not the kind of guy who rifles through his wife's belongings. I've always thought if you have to snoop, you're already halfway to the end. But you know what's worse than snooping? Feeling like an idiot. I stood there staring at the unlocked phone, a halo of flower scent thick in the air. Curiosity isn't what drove me. It was survival. I opened her messages. Nothing suspicious. Nothing obvious. Just emojis, a few texts from nurses, and a long thread with Anton that looked professional, too professional. No jokes. No warmth. Like someone wiped the glass clean before I walked in. No man writes that sterile unless he's hiding the fingerprints. But the call logs? There he was. Dr. Anton M., 3 times that week. All after 10 p.m. That's when the itch started. Not physical. Not something you can scratch. The kind that burrows deep under your ribs and starts chewing. I closed the phone, backed away like it had teeth, and took a long breath through my nose. The scent of lilies was nauseating now. I went to the trash, opened the lid, and dropped the bouquet in. Quietly. Like it was a crime scene. I lay awake that night. Staring at the ceiling, listening to Jessie's breathing. Not peaceful. Just consistent. Measured. Like a metronome. It made me feel like I was lying next to a stranger who had rhythm but no soul. I didn't ask her about the flowers the next morning. Didn't ask why she skipped her wine. Didn't even ask who Anton was to her when she wasn't wearing a scrub cap and a badge. I just made coffee. Stirred it slow. Watched her pack her lunch like it was just another day. She kissed me on the cheek, said she had a C-section scheduled for noon, and walked out the door. As she turned the corner, I noticed something she never did before. She checked her reflection in the hallway mirror. Not once. Twice. Like she wasn't looking for flaws, she was checking for effect. So here's what I knew: something was going on. I didn't know what exactly. But I knew enough to feel stupid for not seeing it sooner. And I also knew this: whatever game she was playing, I wasn't going to be the oblivious fool sitting in the bleachers. If she was crossing a line, I'd meet her halfway. With a plan. With a smile. And with the quiet satisfaction of a man who doesn't shout or cry, but remembers everything. Because when a marriage goes cold, the one with the calmest voice usually wins. The day Jessie burst through the door with that kind of wild-eyed joy people usually reserve for lottery wins or unexpected inheritances, I felt like the walls expanded around me. She didn't even close the door properly, just dropped her bag somewhere between the hallway and the couch and shouted it, "I'm pregnant," as if the walls needed to hear it too. My mouth hung open for a second, not because I doubted her, but because after all the months of tests and appointments and whispered worries under the covers, it finally happened. I stood there like some stunned animal who just found out winter's over. I pulled her close, maybe tighter than I should have, kissed the top of her head like I'd just been handed some delicate, sacred object. And in that moment, the world was right again. I forgot the flowers. I forgot the late-night calls. I forgot the way she'd been moving through life lately like someone performing a role she wasn't entirely comfortable with. We opened a bottle of sparkling juice she kept in the back of the fridge for celebrations, poured it into our wedding glasses, and toasted to this impossible miracle like two characters in a movie we thought we'd never star in. She said the test was positive that morning at the hospital, said she'd taken it on a whim between cases, one of those digital kinds that leaves no room for guessing. It said, "Pregnant," clear as day. She even took a photo of the result, showed it to me like it was a contract. I looked at that screen, and something in my gut turned. Not in a bad way at first. Just a flicker. Like a draft in a warm room. But it passed. Or I told myself it did. Over the next few days, Jessie started glowing the way pregnant women in magazines do. She was lighter, brighter, walked differently. Not like someone trying to protect a baby yet, but like someone who was suddenly a secret sun in her own sky. The hospital staff found out within 48 hours. Nurses and residents brought her small gifts, books with pastel covers, organic creams, even a silver rattle engraved with some Latin phrase about life. They wrote her notes on surgical masks and clipped them to the nurse station bulletin board. And Jessie? She floated through it all like a queen on a cloud, laughing louder than usual, touching her stomach like she already felt the baby's heartbeat from the outside. I watched from the sidelines, a little dazed, a little proud. Except for one thing. Anton didn't say a word. Not a single congratulation. Not even a raised eyebrow. When they announced it during a staff meeting, someone brought out cupcakes with pink and blue frosting, and everyone clapped. Everyone but him. He just leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, staring at Jessie like he was doing a differential diagnosis on her soul. That was the first time I noticed how uncomfortable she looked under his gaze. Her smile faltered for half a second, like a record skipping in a song. She reached for a cupcake anyway and made some joke about cravings, but I saw it. That glitch. That flash of panic. I should have ignored it. I almost did. But then I remembered something else. The math. The timeline. She said she was 8 weeks along. 8. which meant conception would have landed us somewhere in mid-January. The problem is, in mid-January, Jessie and I weren't speaking. At least, not in any meaningful way. She was working overtime, volunteering for night shifts, claiming that a senior doctor had taken medical leave and someone needed to step in. I'd see her in the mornings, barely. She'd roll in, shower, collapse on the bed, and sleep until her next shift. Our schedules barely overlapped. And more importantly, we hadn't been, well, trying that month. Not with any real effort. And that's when the flicker from before roared back in full force. I didn't say anything. Not yet. I went back and checked the calendar like a madman, like some obsessed accountant trying to balance emotional books. We hadn't been together that week. I remember it now. I'd gone to visit my mother. She'd been in a rehab facility after a fall. I stayed for 3 days. Came back to find Jessie asleep on the couch, phone still in her hand, screen dark. That was exactly 8 weeks ago. Give or take a few days. I wanted to believe the test was wrong. That maybe she was just rounding up. But Jessie is precise. She doesn't round anything. I tried to dismiss the thought again, but it clung to the corners of my mind like mold. I told myself maybe it was early implantation. Maybe it was some kind of miracle timing. Maybe. But maybe was starting to feel like a rope fraying in the wind. Then came the night I picked her up from the hospital because her car was in the shop. She came out laughing with a junior nurse, carrying a bag full of tiny onesies someone had gifted her. As she got in the car, she sighed and said, "Everyone's been so sweet, except Anton. He hasn't even looked me in the eye." I asked if that bothered her. She said of course not. That it was just typical Anton, cold, clinical, emotionally constipated. She used that phrase. I laughed. Forced. But something about how fast she answered, how quickly she buried the subject, told me everything I needed to know. Anton didn't ignore her because he was indifferent. He ignored her because he knew something I didn't. Or maybe he suspected something I was only beginning to fear. I've known a lot of silences in my life, but his silence. It was the loudest one yet. I always believed that when someone shows you who they are, you should listen the first time, but Anton was the kind of man who wore masks so well, you'd need a microscope to catch the crack. Jessie had insisted for years that he was just eccentric, brilliant but socially awkward, the kind of doctor who confused human emotion with hospital protocol. And I'd bought it because I had no reason not to. Until she sat me down one evening, palms clammy, face pale, and said she needed to show me something. It wasn't a confession. It wasn't a request for forgiveness. It was a kind of surrender. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through a string of messages from Anton, each one worse than the last. They started innocently enough, compliments on her work, encouragement after tough surgeries, but then they shifted. He wrote things like, "I can't stop thinking about you, and I made a mistake staying in my marriage, and if you love me even a little, don't keep this baby." I stared at those words like they were written in a language I never wanted to learn. He promised her a future, said he'd leave his wife, said he'd help her start over, even take her to a private clinic if she didn't want to keep the child. The tone of the messages wasn't frantic, it was controlled, confident, like he was used to getting what he wanted. Jessie watched my face the whole time, like she was waiting for a storm. I remember the heat behind my eyes, the tightening of my jaw, but I didn't shout. I just asked one question, "Why are you showing me this now?" She said she thought I deserved to know, that she never responded to him beyond what was necessary, and that she never once considered his offer. I believed her, maybe because I wanted to, or maybe because her voice cracked in a way that didn't feel rehearsed. I told her we'd deal with it together. I told her to block his number. I told her to keep her distance at work, and most of all, I told her to tell someone, HR, her supervisor, anyone. She nodded, but deep down, I think we both knew she wouldn't. Not right away. The hospital was her world, and Anton, unfortunately, held sway in that world like a silent monarch. A week later, she went back to work. Things weren't perfect between us, but I was trying to believe again. Trying to focus on the future. Then came the morning she called me from a hallway outside the OR, voice trembling, saying she couldn't stop vomiting. I assumed it was morning sickness. The kind that knocks the wind out of you without warning. She'd been throwing up at odd hours for days, hadn't kept a proper meal down since Sunday. She said Anton had seen her slumped over a sink near the locker rooms and brought her a thermos of tea. Said he made it himself with ginger and lemon. Said it helped his wife during her pregnancies. She drank half of it. 10 minutes later, she was on the floor, clutching her stomach. The nausea wasn't like the others, she told me. It was fast, violent, a different kind of wrong. Her hands were shaking, her vision blurred, and she said the back of her throat burned. One of the nurses helped her up, got her to a resting room. That's when she noticed the grainy residue at the bottom of the thermos. Pale, almost white. Bitter smell. She scooped a bit out with a tissue, looked around to see if anyone was watching, and tucked it into her purse. When she got home, she showed me the thermos. I took one whiff and nearly gagged. Jessie said she recognized the scent, faint but familiar. Then she pulled out a drawer from our bathroom cabinet and took down an old blister pack of birth control she hadn't used in over a year. Crushed one of the pills between her fingers. Same smell. Same texture. I stared at the thermos again, suddenly seeing it for what it was, not an act of kindness, but a quiet ambush. We sat there in silence for what felt like an hour, the air thick with disbelief. Jessie kept repeating that she didn't want to believe it. That maybe he made a mistake. That maybe it was a mix-up. But even she didn't sound convinced. She didn't go back to the hospital the next day. Said she needed time. Said she needed to think. I didn't ask what she meant by that. I just nodded. We still haven't called anyone. Still haven't made it official. But tomorrow, I'm going to drive her to a private lab. We're getting the residue tested. And if it comes back the way I think it will, Anton's going to learn what happens when a man crosses every line and thinks no one's paying attention. But for now, I wait. Watch. And plan. Because there's more to this story than just a crushed pill in a thermos. And I have a feeling we've only scraped the surface. The doctor's office was cold in that impersonal, overly sanitized way that never quite lets you relax, even when the news is good. Jessie sat on the edge of the table, both hands clutching the fabric of the gown like she was trying to hold herself together. I stood nearby, arms crossed, pretending I wasn't watching every flicker of her expression. When the doctor finally came in and said the baby was fine, heartbeat strong, development on track, Jessie exhaled in a way that made the whole room feel breathable again. I didn't realize how tightly I'd been wound until my shoulders dropped on their own. We drove home in silence, a tired kind of peace settling between us, and once inside, she curled up on the couch and said she wanted to forget all of it. The thermos, the residue, the messages. She said it like someone begging for amnesty. She said it was a nightmare, a one-time horror that had already taken too much space in our lives. I didn't argue. Maybe because I needed the break too. She told me she was filing for a transfer to another hospital, a position had opened up across town, a smaller maternity clinic with fewer politics and no Antons lurking in staff lounges. I nodded, said it was a good idea, even helped her update her resume. She looked relieved, hopeful even. For a while, it worked. We didn't speak about Anton, didn't mention the crushed pills, didn't dwell on the messages that had stopped coming. We moved forward, or at least tried to. The baby became the new center of gravity. She started buying little things, a white blanket with tiny bears, a soft mobile for above the crib, maternity jeans she insisted were stylish. I watched her belly grow, touched it when she guided my hand there, listened when she talked about names and how she wanted a natural birth. But just when it all started to feel like healing, the messages returned. Not frequent, just enough to disrupt sleep. First, a short apology. Then another, longer one. Then a string of texts about guilt, confusion, something about being under pressure and not knowing what he was doing. He said he never meant to hurt anyone. He said he was unraveling. He said he still thought about her every night. I read them all without showing her, then she saw one pop up when my phone buzzed in the kitchen. Her face paled. She begged me not to do anything. Said Anton was spiraling and didn't need confrontation, just distance. She made me promise to delete the texts and block his number again. I agreed, though something in me started to coil like a spring. I told myself he'd get tired and move on. But I was wrong. It was a Thursday. Jessie had left early for her new job, a long shift covering for a colleague. I was home, finishing an overdue project on my laptop, when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, and for a moment I debated ignoring it. But something pulled me up. When I opened the door, Anton stood there, hair unkempt, eyes bloodshot, holding nothing, not even a bag or folder, just himself. I didn't move. I told him to leave. He didn't. He said he needed to talk. I should have slammed the door, should have called someone, but instead I stepped outside, closed the door behind me, and faced him like a man shaking hands with a ghost. He started talking immediately, fast and low, like someone trying to confess before courage ran out. He said he couldn't take it anymore. Said Jessie meant more to him than just a mistake. Said it wasn't what I thought. Said they'd been seeing each other before the pregnancy. Said she told him she was going to leave me. I stared at him without a word, unmoved. He saw that I wasn't believing any of it, so he did what cowards always do when they want to prove something painful, he showed proof. He took out his phone, opened a hidden folder, and turned the screen toward me. I only had to look for 2 seconds before my stomach turned. I recognized our old bedspread. The dresser I built with my own hands. Jessie's voice, laughing in a tone I hadn't heard in years, filled the air like a toxin. Anton flipped through the gallery, each swipe a punch to the ribs. He said he'd kept it all because he thought they'd end up together, and now he didn't know what to do. Said he didn't mean to ruin her life, just wanted the truth to come out. I said nothing. Took the phone from his hand without asking. Scrolled further. It didn't stop. Dates, timestamps, locations that matched weekends when she said she had training sessions or late shifts. I gave him back the phone, stepped back, and stared at him. He tried to say something else, something about how he was sorry. I didn't hear it. I closed the door without a word and locked it. Then I stood there, hands still on the handle, the sound of his footsteps fading down the driveway, and felt the entire house shift around me. She would be home in 4 hours. I didn't know yet what I was going to say. But I knew one thing. The child might still be mine. But the story I'd built with Jessie, that was no longer a story. That was a file folder on a stranger's phone. There's a moment when rage stops being loud and turns into something sharper, something silent and surgical. That's where I found myself the morning after Anton showed up at my door with his pocket gallery of betrayal. I didn't sleep that night, just sat in the kitchen staring at a wall that had once held our wedding photo, now bare and shadowed by early dawn. I realized that justice, if I wanted it, wasn't going to come from arguing or pleading or hoping. It had to be taken. And not with fists. With precision. With truth. So I drove across the city to Anton's neighborhood, a clean, quiet cul-de-sac with manicured lawns and mailboxes that still had decorative flags on them. His house looked like something from a catalog, fake in its perfection. I knocked on the door. His wife answered, still in a robe, hair messy from a late morning. I introduced myself. She squinted, said the name sounded familiar. I told her it should. Then I told her why I came. She laughed at first, a brittle sound that didn't quite reach her eyes. She said I must be mistaken. Said Anton wouldn't do that. Said he adored their children. Said he was stressed lately, sure, but loyal. I didn't argue. I just said I could prove it. I asked if he was home. She said yes, he was in the shower. I asked if his phone was around. She hesitated. Then gestured toward the kitchen table. It sat there like a ticking clock. She followed me cautiously. I picked up the phone, still warm, and waited. Anton came down minutes later, towel around his neck, freezing when he saw me. He opened his mouth to say something, but I cut him off. I told him if he didn't unlock the phone, I'd assume guilt. If he refused, I'd still show up at the hospital, at his church, at his children's school events, wherever people who trusted him gathered. His wife said, "Unlock it." He tried to stall, mumbling about privacy. She said it again, sharper. "Unlock it now." He tapped the screen. The phone lit up. I took it, navigated to the folder he'd shown me. It was still there. Same title. Same faces. I didn't scroll far. Just enough. I turned the screen to her. She stared. Said nothing. Stared longer. Then took the phone from my hand like it was a loaded weapon. Anton tried to talk, to explain, to plead. She didn't listen. She didn't scream. She just walked away, carrying the phone, her steps slow and deliberate. I heard drawers opening, doors slamming. Within 10 minutes, Anton was outside in his driveway, barefoot, clutching a duffel bag and a hoodie. She threw a pair of shoes at his feet. Told him not to come back. Told him she'd be calling her lawyer. Told him the kids were staying with her parents until she decided what came next. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just stood there as Anton, who once thought himself the center of some twisted love story, now looked like a soaked mutt exiled from his own life. I turned and walked to my car. As for Jessie, I didn't need confrontation. I didn't need closure. I just needed distance. She texted me within the hour, saying she loved me, saying Anton was unstable, that he must have lied, that I was the only person she ever wanted. Then came the calls. Then came her sister, calling on her behalf, saying Jessie hadn't eaten in days. Then her mother, saying mistakes happen and families can recover. Then her father, who'd never liked me much but now begged me to talk to her, saying she was carrying my child, that I couldn't abandon my own blood. I listened. Politely. Then blocked each number one by one. I left the city that same week. No letter. No explanation. I packed a bag, took my savings, and found a quiet place 2 states over where no one knew my name. I didn't sell the house right away. I left it furnished, locked it up, turned off the water, let it sit. Like a museum of everything I once believed. Maybe she still thinks I'll come back. Maybe she still tells herself it was all a misunderstanding. But some betrayals aren't loud. They don't scream. They just sit quietly inside you like a nail in the wall where a picture used to hang. You can cover it with paint, but it's still there. And once you've seen it, you can't pretend it was never there at all.